Hello and welcome to the Madecast, the official podcast of the Museum of Art and Digital Entertainment, a series of lectures on video game history as part of the Made's ongoing effort to preserve history through teaching and displaying of playable exhibits of rare games and consoles.
While life in the time of COVID has forced us to close our doors, the support of people like you has allowed us to continue to bring history to you through lectures like the one you'll hear in a few minutes. I'm Chun.
I'm Anthony.
I'm Red.
And I'm Miles. This week we continue with Made in Progress as Leland sits down with Daniel Poole, librarian by day, writer, game designer, and podcaster by night. They talk first games, making games, game jams, and lessons learned from them. But first, let's get into some news.
So, news front. Sony still not doing too hot with developers at the moment.
They keep making headlines every week.
And not for the reasons that are generally known as positive. More developers just keep hammering on them about their immediate pullout of the store and just their lack of communication, which has been an issue with Sony in the past between developers. They made a big deal about trying to be more like indie developer friendly with the PS4, so it's kind of interesting seeing that little hiccups in that type of relationship that they championed so hard for right now. But we will keep you updated with more Sony news as it develops. Anthony, you said there was some news with the PS4 internal clock battery?
Yes, so people are going bonkers over this right now. Inside the PS4, there's what's called a battery clock.
Okay.
And basically its role is to verify the time and date that the trophies you unlock are correct in order to prevent cheating, trophy cheating for whoever does that. But one major design flaw found out by someone is that it's eventually going to die, unfortunately. And when it does, that'll render all of your games unplayable as well as your physical copies of those games.
It seems like a pretty big oversight.
So like the internal clock battery, once it dies, it just bricks your system.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Since we're seeing PlayStation servers being shut down for PS3, PS Vita, PSP, people are sort of worried like, oh, okay, well, if my battery dies in the near future, 10, 15 years, and Sony shuts off the servers for PS4, then all of my treasured games will vanish, and apparently this is a huge issue for game preservation. And yeah, as I said, the people are going bonkers over this.
Yeah,
that's not good. That's not good. I think we will be able to think of some good ways or some special ways in order to help out with the Made doing that. It's like you just have to plug them in every now and then. I don't know. We'll see.
They really want people to move on to the next generation, it seems like.
Yeah, they really want people to go to... They're shutting down PS3. They really want people to go to PS4 now, right when the battery clocks are dying. So, clock battery. Well, with that, bring it over to a little brighter side. We're going to take it over to Leland and Daniel with their fabulous talk. Yeah, like we said earlier, he's a writer, librarian, and a podcast host by night. I don't think he sleeps very much. But anyway, here they are, Leland and Daniel.
Hello and welcome to Made in Progress, which is a show produced by the Madecast, which is in turn produced by the Museum of Art and Digital Entertainment, where I, Leland, am talking to the next generation of game developers about the games that made them. So on today's episode, our guest is Daniel J. Poole. They are a writer and librarian from the Southern Great Plains, and they also produce a podcast called Double Issue, alongside making games.
Hey.
Welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
Of course. So why don't, to start off, you just say a little more about yourself and about just a brief overview of what you do.
Yeah. So I work at a university library. I work at the University of Science and Arts of Oklahoma. It's kind of cool. It's one of the only liberal arts public universities in the area.
Wow.
But it's a really teeny school. But I work at the makerspace there, so I get to play with 3D printers and laser cutters and all that kind of fun stuff. And
very fun.
Yeah. And then I work on Double Issue, which is a podcast where we've been taking a little hiatus, but we write and tell stories, me and my writing partner, and just share them back and forth. And then I've been making some games on the side. And I'm hoping to have my first kind of big for money game coming out, if not late this year, the beginning of next year.
Ooh, very exciting. I'm sure we'll get into what that game is about later. But the first thing I want to do is kind of jump back in time to when you were a little, when you were like a little kid. What sort of video games did you play? Like, do you have any super early memories of video games that you'd like to share?
I do. So I'm pretty sure how it worked was my dad brought a big box of Atari stuff out of the closet one day and set it all up, and we played I think it's called Crusade, but you had the little Pong paddle and there were 4 of you playing Pong basically. And we for like a full week, my brothers and I were just like, oh, this is the greatest, this is so wonderful. And my dad was like, oh, if you like that, you're gonna love Nintendo.
Ooh,
that was state of the art.
Very quick evolution.
Yeah. And I remember playing Super Mario Brothers 3 for the first time, just being, this is what games could be? This is the best. And little did I know that I think the Super Nintendo was, getting ready to sunset already at that point. But that was kind of my first big introduction. And then I was trying to remember, I had a lot of, so I'm dyslexic severely, so I couldn't read forever. And one of the games that I actually learned to read on was XCOM, which is an old DOS game.
Yes.
And it was just kind of funny because my parents were struggling to get me to read. And I forget what the word was, but it was something like cephalopod or something like that. And I just rattled it off. And they're like, how do you know that? It's like, oh,
priorities.
Well, yeah, I had to know that word for the mission.
That's great. So, what appealed to you about XCOM?
What was it? I think the big part of it was that my brothers were into it. Anything that they thought was cool, I automatically decided was super cool. And I really liked how much you could customize how you approach the game. And what I like the most in most games is exploration. So there was a lot to explore in how you approach missions and how you set up your bases. And so I wasn't really into the fighting itself that much, but I was really into the like, oh, let's make the system work really well. Let's go explore what this does when we try this. So they were all like, they were both finishing the game and winning. And meanwhile, I was trying to see how long an alien in a smoked out shed could stand up.
Yeah, slightly different priorities.
Yeah, no. I'm the person that'll spend 3 hours trying to get on the little piece of geometry in a game for no reason, just because it seemed like something to do.
I mean, that is a reason itself.
Yeah.
That's great. So as you kind of grew up, and as time went on, what sort of games did you find yourself being into?
So for the longest time, I played a lot of JRPGs and kind of long form narrative games. And there for a while, I kind of got into just like the Halos and sort of the popular shooters. But I think it was when I got into college, I just stopped being as interested in just a straight violence game. And
yeah, there's a time and a place for that. That is, I think, for a lot of people, restricted to being a teenager.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting that you mention JRPGs and other sort of narrative games, because those are very reading heavy games.
Yeah.
They tend to be extremely reading based. What was that experience like for you?
That was interesting. So I think it was 5th grade when I was finally able to start reading. And so I went from basically a second or third grade reading level in fifth grade to like a fifth or sixth by sixth grade. And then I think when I hit seventh grade, I started reading like high school, early college. So it was just really quick once I figured it out.
Yeah.
So I feel like I was making up for lost time. So I was running through like Final Fantasy and Parasite Eve and all those kind of games just really quick back to back. And I don't know, it was like a whole new world had kind of opened up that I hadn't been able to process and get into before then.
Yeah, absolutely. That's really cool. So then how long have you been making games?
Let's see. Since I was a little kid, I tried to make board games to differing amounts of results. But when I was in college, I had a buddy who wanted to use Game Maker and make just a real simple, I think like a character platformer. And he needed someone to do art. And I was like, oh, that's something people can do. Oh, I never put that together.
People make games.
That's lame. That doesn't happen. That's not real. So I think it was probably like, I must have been sophomore year of college that I started messing around with Game Maker. But we both kept getting busy. But so right after college, he contacted me again and said, hey, we're hold for cat sneeze. Right after college, he got a buddy and me together and said, we've got two programmers and an art person here. Let's make a game. And so that's when I first got into more of a, I wouldn't say professional, but moved up to an actual hobbyist game maker. And our first attempt was to make a twin stick shooter. And we were just going to make it real simple, just have really easy layouts. And it was really funny to me is our first meeting, we said, okay, this is going to be 2D. It's going to be real simple, laid out. And the second meeting, one of the programmers who's kind of our lead said, okay, so it's going to be in 3D, right? And everyone just, is it? So that was kind of my first experience with game development, was watching feature creep just happen in real time. But after that, the project kind of stuttered out and we all kind of had different things going on in our lives. I was like, well, I can keep doing this in my own time. And so that's when I started getting back into Game Maker and Unity and started putting stuff up on Itch.io. And that's been really rewarding to actually get a product from start to finish and out that isn't just on fire.
Yeah, you have a lot of really fun, very different projects on your Itch.io. Can you tell me a little bit about what that's been like what it's been, maybe what you've learned throughout this process of developing all these different types of games?
Yeah. So a lot of the things on my Itch.io right now are tutorial projects where I'd followed along or put a couple of different tutorials together. And so far, it's been just to kind of explore what the engines can do and to try to put my own little spin on each one. But what's been interesting is taking these kind of very taking different ideas that necessarily stick together and trying to figure out where the connective tissue is between them. I was trying to think of one. I did one called Sketch Jumper, and the idea was just to make all the art look like it was drawn on a legal pad. And the game itself is terrible. It's not a lot there. But it's kind of like, I don't know, like playing jazz or just painting without really sketching it out first. Is as I went through the project, I learned like, oh, I can do this here with this code. And it's just really interesting to see what comes up kind of, what's it called whenever you start writing a journal and you don't pick a destination?
Free writing.
Free writing, yeah. It kind of feels like free writing in that sense. As I've developed and done this a few times now, I'm like, okay, I need to have a beginning, a middle, an end, some objectives in there. But it's been really interesting just kind of jumping in and saying, well, what happens if I do this?
Yeah, that's such a fun way to approach game design, of being this kind of like sketchy improv thing that very much exists for like other forms of media and creative outlets that people do. It's like, okay, let's play around with this. And I think there isn't usually that attitude with games. I think a lot of times people feel like, oh, if I want to make a game, I need to know everything about what I'm doing before I even start, especially if I'm doing this on my own. And I that's really refreshing for me to hear that, you know, you kind of have an embracing of the process being messy and being for the sake of learning and kind of doing something different. I really like that.
Yeah. And that's how I finally actually did force myself to finish a project and put it out, was through a game jam on Itch.io. Mm-hmm. I signed up and I was like, okay, whatever I have at the end of this weekend, that's what I'm going to have. And that really motivated me to, sorry, get the cat out here. That really motivated me to actually force myself to learn and sit down and do a quality of work that I wasn't used to doing when I was just, oh, I'll get to it next week.
Right. Yeah. So there's benefits to having a kind of freeform style, but there's also drawbacks of not totally finishing games.
I finally I need to empty out my dead projects folder. Like they're just staring at me where they're not going to get done.
Can you tell me a little bit about some of the influences for the games that you've made in the past? What sort of games tend to inspire you?
Yeah, I've been really inspired by a lot of the indie games that have been coming out in kind of the recent renaissance in the last 10, 20 years. So let me just try to think. One of my favorite games was games like Delver. It's a procedural generated dungeon crawler. But the way the art and the design work together just make me just kind of get my wheels spinning on thinking. I love games like Morrowind from a long time back, because
throwback.
Even though the systems are buggy and things don't work right. Gosh, girl. This is my cat, Mikey, and she's really clingy for some reason.
Oh, I love that. I love cats.
She usually is just very chill when I'm on the computer, and for whatever reason, today is hugs time. She's dug in.
Yeah, the only reason that the cats who live with me aren't in here is because I have closed the door and I have not let them come bother me, because they would be all up in here.
Yeah, my house is a remodel. And so my desk is currently out in the hallway.
Oh, fun.
Yeah, so I can't close it.
Okay, anyways, back to video games.
Anyway, back to video games. But yeah, one thing that really opened my head about what games could be was playing through Morrowind, because despite its terrible bugs and choppy graphics and art, the way the story just really embraced being weird and trying things even when they didn't quite work out really made me want to make games that weren't just another Mario or...
Right, because there's plenty of games out there that are, I guess, just another blank. You could say that about any popular game, that it's, I think with games especially, like, there's an impulse to be like, oh, I could make X but different, or with any game that you could name.
I could make the Dark Souls of Inner.
Yeah, the Dark Souls of Animal Crossing, or yeah, like Harvest Moon, but not. Yeah, you hear that a lot, and there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, we have like games like Stardew Valley, which are like Harvest Moon, but not, and that are insanely popular. And of course, I mean, that's the whole point of the show, is that the video games we play do influence us, but you know, it's good for people to push boundaries as well. Although, so one of the things the Maid does is teach kids how to make video games. And they come in and they're like, I want to make Mario, but it's also Fortnite, but it's also they're playing basketball, and I want it to be the best game ever. And we're like, okay, cool. Like that's a starting point. Like that's something. Is you have that spark of inspiration. I guess it doesn't matter where it comes from.
Right. Well, that was one of my cautionary tales. Is I was on a second game development team, and the ad on Facebook was looking for a game writer. I was like, okay, I've done a lot of writing and I understand the game's writing process. It's like, oh, that'll be perfect. And so I get to the first meeting and I've kind of sketched out the story that I was going to pitch. And the lead developer said, okay, so tell me about the mechanics. I was like, oh, I thought you were going to tell me the mechanics.
Ooh.
Okay. So second meeting, okay, here are the mechanics I've thought about. He's like, well, it's supposed to be Halo plus Dark Souls plus Civilization plus. I was like, oh, okay. We need to think about what our actual core product is here.
Well, since you have worked as part of game development teams and also on your own, do you have a preference between working with others or on your own on games?
I think for bigger projects, I really do like working on a team. Because my skill set only goes so far, it is really nice to have someone else who can go, oh, well, you can do this part this way, and kind of save me from myself. Because otherwise I'll spend weeks just trying to learn a new programming language or a new thing just to do one little piece. But for like a game jam game, it is really rewarding to just jump in and try doing something yourself.
Right.
I made a game called Zug, which is a little Game Boy Maker game, and just learning the minimum requirements that a Game Boy will allow in the cartridge space, and learning how to do the music and all those things was really rewarding as just a weekend project.
Yeah, and you end up getting like a lot of different skill sets and experiences out of doing something on your own by nature of having to do the music and the art and everything else.
Yeah.
I also wanted to ask about, so I know that through what you do for the university you work at in the makerspace, that with COVID and being online, that you guys have pivoted to teaching some more game development, that sort of stuff. What has that been like?
So we're still getting into it. Our university was not prepared for an online setting completely by the time COVID hit. Luckily, just super luckily, we had just gotten a new system in place just before it happened. Mm-hmm. And so we were able to go to online, but it's been a learning curve just to get people used to the new way of doing things.
Right, absolutely.
Yeah. And our school isn't, we don't really have a technical or engineering field or computer science. So a lot of the people we have are either like life sciences, biologies, or arts and humanities. So a lot of what I've been trying to do is use things like Construct 3, which has a little more drag and drop coding, to try to just introduce the ideas of the logic coding, but to not get them hung up at that point.
Right.
So it's been interesting because trying to present, I mean, game development's kind of complicated, but trying to present it in a don't be scared. That's been my main goal.
That's good. And I also want to know about what kind of your end goal is, if you have one, with making games. Like, would you like to be doing that, full time as your job someday? Do you envision it always keeping just as a hobby?
I would love to go full time at some point. My kind of just daydream is to open like a small Main Street, physical address and hire a handful of friends and just kind of do that all day. Mm-hmm. I was really inspired by, I'm going blank on their name. It's a office co-op in California. I'll have to look them up here in a sec, but they just have an office that they rent out spaces to people. And it's like 3 or 4 different indie studios are ran out of this one little spot. I was like, oh, that's the dream.
Yeah, that's got to be such a crazy and inspiring environment to be in. Absolutely. So I want to also now talk about the game that you mentioned, that you kind of teased in your intro about yourself. Do you want to tell us a little bit about what that game is?
Sure. So it's very pre-production, but it's going to be an RPG Maker game. That was actually the first program I learned how to do anything in, was RPG Maker, like 95 or whatever it was.
Wow, I had no idea RPG Maker has been around for that long.
Oh, it's ancient.
Yeah, wow. I learned something.
Tell the company, but my brothers and I stole it from the internet in the 90s.
The internet police are going to come for
They're
you.
Coming. I paid for a legitimate
You wouldn't download
copy.
a car.
I totally would download a car, and I would 3D print it.
We all would download a car. Yeah, 3D printers exist. All of us would download a car. You probably can download a car. Anyways, RPG Maker.
Yeah, so I've wanted to work with RPG Maker for a while, and so I thought this would be a great opportunity to kind of play with it. And then I was really inspired by the game Lisa, because apparently it was made in RPG Maker, along with a couple other, what was the other one? Yumi Nikki, and a few others like that. I was like, oh, I didn't even know anyone could do this much with RPG Maker. So I'd gotten looking back at it just to make like a silly game. And once I'd looked at it for a while, I was like, oh, I could do like the 3 games I've wanted to do for a minute that I've been hitting my head against a wall on Unity with. So it's been really nice getting back into it. And the concept will be a horror RPG Maker game to play homage to some of the other ones that have inspired me. And the twist for me is I'm trying to just come through a story where it's not about, a character's guilt, like in PT and a lot of other recent horror games. With some of the recent political news in America, I was like, it's real weird that like your neighbors could just want to harm you at any moment.
Yeah,
that's weird, right?
What a concept. Ooh.
So the game is a microcosm of that. So right now I'm doing a HD remake of the game Nevat, which is my very first or second game I put on my itch.io, which is just a little goblin going through a maze, getting chased by ogres. And so that'll be where I learn everything and get it released. But then what I'm calling Grey Lodge is going to be a full art and music remade project.
Whoa, it's exciting.
Yeah. And hopefully I'm getting a couple people to team up with me. We'll see.
Ooh, exciting.
Yeah.
So that'll be on the more collaborative side of things versus just you on your own.
Yeah. Which means the music won't be just awful. I forget which. I think it's Sketch Jumper. You really have to turn the music or the volume down because it'll blast you out.
Okay, that's a warning for anybody who's going to go check out Daniel's games. That one, please turn the volume down before you play. Good to get that disclaimer out.
I got to watch a streamer play it live, and it was recording. He just tweeted me later. And I realized in horror as he was clicking on it, I was like, oh no, I need to have a giant warning on there.
Well, can you tell me more about what that was like to watch somebody on stream play your game?
Oh, that was weird. Yeah, it was more like watching someone else. Like, I felt like I was watching myself watch someone else play my game. It was so surreal. Because I've heard other people read my writing, and I've kind of gotten used to that idea, and I've gotten used to seeing myself like in film, but seeing someone play a game that I made the whole time, I was like, oh, I made that. Oh, that's weird.
Yeah. Yeah, that must have been super surreal. Like I'm still getting used to hearing my own voice on this podcast. I can't imagine like seeing someone else without me, directly showing it to them experience like something I made. That's what I think would be super insane.
Well, that's been
that you weren't there.
Yeah, my game development experience where I've kind of cut my teeth is through role playing games on tabletop, And in those cases, you're always right there to tell people, okay, here's what I need, and here's what you're thinking, you're doing, kind of like lay it out the idea. And so handing off my program baby to someone else and watching them play, I was like, oh no, they don't know.
Yeah. Do you think that there's some overlap in your interest or like the things that you learn from tabletop games versus video games?
Oh yeah, for sure. In my opinion, every design element that you learn for tabletop game design feeds directly into video game design. It's so close.
Right.
So, for example, laying out the levels right now for the project game, it's been really nice having my tabletop background. So, like, in this next room, we need to make sure there's like some breathing room. And the player needs some time to explore and think. And then we can put them back in a stressful situation. We can't just do that back to back. And that's just really nice to fall back onto from my time when I would write like D&D modules and things like that.
Yeah, there's I think a lot of overlap in being a DM and being a game designer, that so many things you're doing very similarly, and so many of your goals are the same. I mean, you want somebody to be engaged and have fun and maybe be scared and feel strong emotions and want to come back. And I mean, that's everything that you're doing for a game as well.
Yeah, exactly.
So this question is the most serious and hardest of all. What games have you been playing lately?
Oh man. So because my schedule is a school schedule, I kind of have a yearly game playing bonanza right at Christmas. So
love that. Just into your calendar. Just this is the game time.
This is the games month.
Games month.
So this last Christmas, I put in way too many hours on Cyberpunk 2077. Having said I've gotten away from shooting games, I jumped in there. I had a really good time with that, but I'm pretty sure I was playing the game wrong, as I usually do. Because I decided, my boy.
How are you playing that game wrong?
Well, I decided I played through as a nomad, and in the game, nomads are like kind of hicks that live in these car groups. And I was like, I bet my boy is a good Midwesterner and he wouldn't hurt nobody. And he's just a lost puppy dog, kind of was how I decided to play him. So I decided to try to not kill as many people as I could, which means you have to...
I love that.
Yeah.
I love pacifist runs of games. I don't know if you know RimWorld at all. That is my favorite game of all time. And it is like often described as a war crime simulator and people do horrible things. And I'm over here like doing a pacifist run. Like my colony is entirely vegetarian, you know, like we do have an elaborate trap system to deal with raiders, but like that's non-violent.
No, I remember watching my brother play some. And I was just, why? Why are you doing these things? I think his game, what was it? He ended up trying to recruit anyone that would come attack him or something like that. Mm-hmm. So there was like a class system in play of like, well, these are the bandits that we've stripped all their goods and clothing from, and they're our workers for now. Right. I was just, oh no, this can go bad very quickly.
Yeah, I can't do that. Other than Cyberpunk 2077, what else have you been into lately?
I've been going through Lisa. That I had like 3 different people on the same day suggest that to me. I was just, okay, well, I need to get into that. And that's horrifying and great. What else? I played a lot of Rebel Galaxy recently. And a bunch of old Genesis games. I got the Genesis collection.
Very fun. Oh, fun.
Yeah. So I was going through like Streets of Rage and Shining Force. I played Shining Force back when I was learning to read. Like, I swear I must have played 75% of it like 3 or 4 times and never finished it. Mm-hmm. So now with modern save systems, I'm like, it's going to happen. I'm going to get to the end.
This is something I hear all the time from the guests on this podcast, that as a kid that there would be a game that they would play most of over and over and over and over again and never actually finished until they were an adult. And everyone so far has said that finishing the game as an adult has been extremely rewarding. So you have that to look forward to.
The other game like that for me was Earthbound, which I've never gotten to the end of.
Yeah. Yeah, Earthbound I never finished either. I remember I remember being a kid, and this is gonna show how young I am, I guess. But I remember like finding an emulator of Earthbound and being like in probably like elementary school, middle school, and being like, what is this? And then like the emulator didn't really work, and so I couldn't save, and so it was just however I could get in one sitting, and I feel like that's a similar experience.
Yeah, we'd got it on an emulator as kids, and I opened it up, and I think like when the Alien Bee came out and was like, you have to save the Earth, and got swatted, I was like, oh, I don't know what this is, and kind of bounced off it. But then my best friend in high school, she was like, oh, you got to try it, and she showed me the first like 30 minutes. And as a high schooler, I was like, okay, this looks great.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we are about out of time, but I do want to give you a chance to plug anything you want to plug. Where can people find you? What should they check out that you do?
Yeah, if you like fiction, you should check out doubleissue.show. And that's my podcast for Double Issue. It's a fiction podcast. We're going to be finishing up a superhero story arc, and then we're going to start a new season that's going to be Goosebumps / Twin Peaks related.
Ooh.
Yeah, so that should be fun. I'm on Itch.io, which is Gwair, GYWAIR.itch.io, and I'm also on Twitter at Gwair.
All right. Well, everyone should go check Daniel out. And thank you so much for coming on today and chatting with me.
Yeah, thank you so much. This is great.
All right. Goodbye, everyone.
Thank you to Leland and Daniel for their talk today. It was marvelous. And we will look forward to an upcoming another episode of Made in Progress. We also, next week, will have a little special episode that is the Just Us League Unleashed. It's the four of us on our first half-hour talk. We're going to be talking some news. We're going to be going through all other things, all sorts of stuff. It's the Just Us League and what got us into video games and wants to get us in the industry, what we want to do, learn a little bit more about us. So thank you for listening to the Museum of Art and Digital Entertainment's official podcast. If you've got any thoughts, questions, corrections, or general museum ideas, shoot us an email at info@themade.org.
We'd like to send a big thank you to everyone who donated recently and to our Patreon supporters who keep the Made afloat. Patreon donors get to listen to this podcast 1 week before it's released on major streaming services, and we'll continue with that with future episodes every week. Till then, I'm Anthony.
I'm Red.
I'm Chun.
And I'm Miles. Thanks, and we'll talk to you next time.